While everybody is looking at the Iran war, Trump has begun doing some very odd things, including removing Trump's troops out of Germany, suggesting Cuba is next, and even asking other nations like South Korea to join the military efforts, among many other requests. And all of this has gone under the radar as it being just rhetoric or insignificant action. But I believe there's something bigger going on with regards to this big reset, as well as this next generation of global power dynamics being fundamentally shifted right before our very eyes. And not a lot of people are talking about it. So let's get into some of the updates and what it might mean. So let's get into it. So about a week ago, President Trump had suggested the possible reduction of troops in Germany. And of course, all of that followed with official news that approximately 5,000 troops would leave from Germany. And there are already some, I think, 36,000 troops. And all of this is going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months. So that's quick. And then, of course, Trump confirmed that as he reposted this article. And what's interesting is that somebody asked him, following the removal of these troops, would you consider other countries?
You talked about possibly pulling out some troops out of Germany. Would you be considering the same thing for Spain and Italy? I mean, they haven't been exactly on board.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I probably will. Why should I? Look, why shouldn't I? Italy has not been of any help to us. And Spain has been horrible, absolutely horrible. It's NATO. It's not even the fact that they're bad. It's one thing if they said nicely, or if they said, okay, we'll help, but the help's a little slow. But the level, and we helped them with Ukraine. They made a mess out of Ukraine, a total mess. And we helped them with Ukraine. Ukraine has nothing to do, we're an ocean apart. It has to do with them. It's like for them, it's their front door. We help them.
So listen carefully to what he's saying there. Of course, he's talking about NATO, but more specifically with Ukraine. And so we'll get back to that here in a little bit. And then, of course, in a very surprising move, as of Monday, which is this past week, a few days ago, Trump announced Project Freedom, where ships would basically be allowed as a humanitarian effort or gesture on behalf of the United States from all across the world. Any ship that is basically stuck in the strait to have free passage escorted by the U.S. Navy. And then as that was happening, this is what Trump said, because a South Korean cargo ship was on fire. Now, I'm not going to speculate what the origins of that was, whether it was an attack, as Trump has said, or whether it was something else. But he had this to say: Iran has taken some shots at unrelated nations with respect to the ship movement. Project Freedom, including a South Korean cargo ship. Perhaps it's time for South Korea to come and join the mission. We've shot down 7 small boats, or as they like to call them, fast boats. And the key thing here is he's asking South Korea to come and join the mission. And remember what he had to say about the Chancellor of Germany back in April, because Trump was talking about how he does not have their support. He says he doesn't know what he's talking about. If Iran had a nuclear weapon, the whole world would be held hostage. I'm doing something with Iran right now that other nations or presidents should have done long ago. No wonder Germany is doing so poorly, both economically and otherwise. And then again, days later, at the end of April, he mentioned that the Chancellor of Germany should spend more time on ending the war with Ukraine, Russia, and fixing his broken country, especially immigration and energy, and less time on interfering with those that are getting rid of the nuclear weapon threat, thereby making the world, including Germany, a safer place. And remember, he's been calling out NATO nations for a very long time in the last couple months. If you think about what he mentioned, with all that talk about Greenland happening months ago, he was calling out countries like Denmark and other NATO countries, saying that world peace is at stake. And then on a Separate Truth post on March 14th, he said, hopefully China, France, Japan, South Korea, the UK, and others that are affected by this artificial constraint will send ships to the area so that the Hormuz Strait will no longer be a threat by a nation that has been totally decapitated. And then, of course, he mentions that in the meantime, the U.S. will be doing their mission, bombing, and continuing Operation Epic Fury. And, of course, a few days later, he mentions that the U.S. has been informed by most of our NATO allies that they don't want to be involved with our military operation against the terrorist regime of Iran. And then again, talking about reiterating they cannot have a nuclear weapon. But this is what he said. He said, I'm not surprised by their action, however, because I always considered NATO, where we spend hundreds of billions of dollars per year protecting these same countries, to be a one-way street. Now that's interesting. He says one-way street. And then he goes on to say, we will protect them, but they will do nothing for us, in particular in a time of need. And of course, days later, he said NATO wasn't there when we needed them, and they won't be there if we need them again. Remember Greenland, that big, poorly run piece of ice. Again, he mentions Greenland. So far, what you've got to understand here is that Trump is calling out the benefits, the value add that these countries are giving with respect to what the U.S. is giving. And what's significant about South Korea and Germany, the largest U.S. military presence in each of those countries? And it seems like Trump is beginning to remove troops from the footsteps, the doorsteps of China and Russia. If he's beginning with Germany, don't be surprised if this happens with South Korea. And the end goal here might be to consolidate the U.S. military in the Western Hemisphere and to relieve these tensions that are happening with Russia and China. And I want to read some commentary by Clandestine because he says some good stuff. Hear me out. Trump called out Germany, South Korea, and Japan for not willing to help with the Strait of Hormuz. What do these nations have in common? They are where we have the largest standing military presence outside the U.S. I think Trump is not just setting up a withdrawal from NATO. I think he's setting up a withdrawal of our military presence around the globe and will eventually begin the process of consolidating U.S. military presence to the Western Hemisphere. Once we are done with Iran and the war in Ukraine is over, I think the end goal is normalized relations with Russia and China, and thus the permanent end to the Cold War that never really ended. This is only possible by removing U.S. military presence off of China and Russia's doorstep, as well as ending Russia-Chinese meddling in our hemisphere via places like Venezuela and Cuba, which is already happening. What if the U.S., Russia, and China just agreed to stop the espionage, weapons of mass destruction, proxy wars, and meddling in each other's regions? What if the superpowers were on the same side instead of against each other? It's possible, and things seem to be inching in that direction. Russia and China are losing their influence in the Western Hemisphere, and Trump is posturing like he's going to remove our presence in the Eastern Hemisphere. I think we are witnessing a restructure of the global order, and the global quote-unquote alliances as we know them are about to shift dramatically. And then he also says, I think the end goal is to withdraw from NATO, which will in turn end the war between Ukraine and Russia, then bring all the troops home to our region, then leave the areas of influence in the hands of the nations in each respective region. After deep state destabilization assets, i.e. terrorist cartels, have been neutralized, the need for our military presence around the globe will no longer be necessary. I think Trump is leveraging the situation in Iran to show the public why we need to withdraw from NATO and bring the troops home from Germany, South Korea, Japan, Australia, and more. I think Trump is using Iran to end the Cold War between the U.S. and Russia-China and prevent full-scale World War III from ever happening in the future. Trump wants to make a deal with Russia and China, and this surely will include removing our standing armies from their doorstep. I think Trump is using Iran to reshape the global order to a, quote, multipolar world where a variety of nations hold spheres of influence as opposed to the complete U.S. hegemony. A world where we are allies/trade partners with Russia and China, not enemies on a collision course for world war. I think we are witnessing a historic global transformation. And one of the main Q posts that comes to mind for me is 140, where it says, what if China, Russia, and others are coordinating with POTUS to eliminate the New World Order? Remember, the deep state's plan was to start some kind of World War III, to have enemies between Russia, China, U.S., and all these guys. And again, I'm not saying that they're going to be kumbaya because of ideological differences, but a lot of it could have been manufactured, and that whole plan was thwarted by Trump. And what does Putin always say about Russia with NATO and Ukraine at their footsteps? Russia is being encroached by more NATO nations, more missile battery systems, more, whatever military stuff that they have right at their borders. And imagine if that happened with the U.S., and that is what happened with Cuba, Venezuela. Because remember back in January, what did Trump and Marco Rubio say about Cuba? Take a listen here.
Yeah, is there a message here for Cuba and Diaz-Canel?
Well, Cuba's an interesting case. Cuba is, not doing very well right now. That system has not been a very good one for Cuba. The people there have suffered for many, many years. And I think Cuba is going to be something we'll end up talking about, because Cuba is a failing nation right now, very badly failing nation. And we want to help the people. It's very similar in the sense that we want to help the people in Cuba, but we want to also help the people that were forced out of Cuba and living in this country. Do you want to say something about that, Marco, please?
Well, I mean, I just gave you a statement a few minutes ago about, when the president speaks, you should take him seriously. So suffice it to say, Cuba is a disaster. It's run by incompetent, senile men, and in some cases, not senile, but incompetent nonetheless. It has no economy. It's in total collapse. And by the way, they were, all of the guards that helped protect Maduro, this is well known, their whole spy agency, all that were full of Cubans. I mean, it's amazing. This poor island took over Venezuela in some cases. One of the biggest problems the Venezuelans have is they have to declare independence from Cuba that tried to basically colonize it from a security standpoint. So, yeah, look, if I lived in Havana and I was in the government, I'd be concerned, at least a little bit.
Cutting off the oil flow to Cuba from Venezuela?
Well, the president already announced a week ago that anything that's sanctioned oil, it's not going to be allowed to get there. So that's a pre-existing.
And remember, there have been discussions about Russian and Chinese influence within Cuba and onto Venezuela, which again is encroaching on U.S. regional territory. Now watch what he says from a few days ago when he was at Palm Beach.
An architect who's really talented, has done a lot of work for him. He's got a flair, a beautiful Hispanic flair in particular. And he comes from originally a place called Cuba, which we will be taking over almost immediately. No, Cuba's got problems. We'll finish one first. I like to finish a job. On the way back from Iran, we'll have one of our big, maybe the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, the biggest in the world. We'll have that come in, stop about 100 yards offshore, and they'll say, "Thank you very much, we give up."
Now, again, listen to what he says there. Cuba has problems, and he's insinuating that they're going to stop by and do something with Cuba. He also said this in a different interview.
Very serious question, Mr. President. Are you going to do for Cuba what you've done for Venezuela, bring in new leadership and free those people up to be happy again? Is Cuba on the line?
I don't really talk about Cuba too much, other than to say that perhaps on the way back from Iran, as we finish that one, you'd like to do one after the other, right? But we'll stop the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, the most gorgeous carrier I've ever seen. We'll stop the Abraham Lincoln a couple of 100 yards offshore, and we'll watch them wanting to do something. No, the people in Cuba, I mean, the country is devastated right now. It's just devastated. So it would be an honor to free it up. I got all the Cuban vote. I got 94% of the Cuban vote in the U.S. And
then listen here to what Senator Lindsey Graham says about President Trump.
I'm not looking for a fair fight. If we get in a fight, I want to win it. I want to win it quick. I'm in Miami. You see this hat? Free Cuba. Stay tuned. Yeah. The liberation of Cuba is upon us. It's just a matter of time now. You see this hat? Make Iran great. President Trump said the only way to make Iran great is for the people to take over. We're marching through the world. We're cleaning out the bad guys. We're going to have relationships with new people that will make us prosperous and safe. I've never seen anybody like it. This is Ronald Reagan plus. Donald Trump is resetting the world in a way nobody could have dreamed of a year ago. He is the greatest commander-in-chief of all time. Our military is the best of all time. Iran is going down, and Cuba is next.
Now remember, the world is looking at it from isolated situations. Oh, Cuba, oh, Iran, oh, Venezuela. But the bigger picture here, as Q and Trump has mentioned, is that the infiltration is mainly at the top and within, whether three-letter agencies or certain people bought out in this swamp, in this deep state within the U.S. And for far too long, the free world, the U.S., we being weaponized, was being used as tools because people from long ago, this deep state, if you want to call it this cabal, whatever name you want to put there, they were using certain parts at the top level to do their bidding. And if you've ever researched some of this stuff, the CIA, a lot of the conspiracy, overthrowing governments back 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago and being used as a tool for the deep state. And the deep state, per Q and others, have infiltrated these ranks of the U.S. And Trump and the White Hats are going through a deep cleaning, a swamp cleaning as we speak. And so he's positioning the U.S. so they can't be used ever again to intimidate and to be weaponized ever again against other country. So I believe that as Trump is removing global footprint, he's allowing localization of efforts. Remember, Trump is against globalization. He wants nationalization. He wants America to be great again. He wants other countries to be great in their own regard. But because this whole system, the U.S., the military manpower of the world has been used and infiltrated for such a long time, when Trump is going to remove, and if he does remove this stronghold, especially away from Russia and China, then we're going to see some crazy big things. And he's doing the same thing for local threats right now, and namely the next one being Cuba. Whether you want to say deep state has infiltrated that country or there's some communist or other influences, who knows? But the point here is that there's a bigger global resetting that's happening that many people are missing. And this is being done intentionally to allow the power to go back to the nations and to the people. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And also, if you guys want to continue to support me, you guys know I am listener supported, with love, the continued prayer, and the financial support. All the information is down in the link below, givesendgo.com/chrisyoonyt. Also have PayPal, Zelle, Venmo. Love you guys. Talk to you guys very soon.